Hello, everybody. My name is Happy, and I'd like to welcome you all to my History Reaction channel. Today, we're returning to Sabaton for To Hell and Back. As always, I will include a link to the original video in the description down below. If you enjoy this video, please head over to Sabaton, show them some love and support for the effort that they put into their music, to their videos, to the stories behind the videos, and historic research in general. I've said this many times, I'll say it again. I love it when musicians, whether they be the performers, the writers, the composers, whatever, put history to music. Even if they don't get it exactly right, I think that they do a great job at helping people remember, helping people get interested in history, and in cases like with Sabaton, sometimes present sides or aspects of the history that we might not normally think about. And I think most importantly, music tends to have this emotional impact. And sometimes we need that, especially professional historians, because the further you get into studying history and becoming a historian or an academic, the easier it is to get pulled in by the academics of it. The idea of looking for the facts and nothing but the facts, and losing track of some of the emotional resonance that can be involved. And if you're trying to do academic research, you need that. You need that detachment. But at the same time, I think that's an important aspect of the history. We've got to understand how history affects people at the time and in the aftermath. And this, I think, is going to be a good video for that, because we're going to be talking about Audie Murphy. I've had several people recommend this video, especially right after I did the electrician video on Audie Murphy. And I've been really looking forward to getting to this one, because Audie Murphy is one of those iconic American heroes that I've always really looked up to. Now, he's a human like anybody else, so he has his flaws, but his war record is indisputable. He is one of the most decorated war heroes of American history, if not the most decorated. And he's not just decorated by the Americans, he's also got awards aplenty from Europe, especially France and Belgium. So this guy is one of those people that has this history of being an iconic hero. But he also comes back from the war, becomes a poet, a musician, and a Hollywood star. He even plays himself in a couple movies, especially the movie To Hell and Back, which is based on his autobiography. He plays himself in a movie about himself, which is brilliant. But he also becomes one of the first prominent Americans with a platform due to his fame both during the war and afterwards, to talk about things like PTSD, which he's had severely. He's suffered from severe PTSD. And he had the courage to come forward and talk about it and bring it to the national attention here in the States, but even internationally, because like I said, he was an internationally decorated hero. And while this has been around forever, whether you call it shell shock, battle fatigue, or later PTSD, getting somebody of Audie Murphy's stature, and with his platform, his music, his poems, and his Hollywood connections, to come forward and talk about it in a public way and bring it to the global conscience as a problem we need to deal with, is, I think, one of his biggest contributions, because we still haven't got that right. We've got killing each other down pretty well. We know how to do that. We got a lot of experience with that. Dealing with the consequences of killing each other, though, that's something that we're still struggling with. And a lot of our soldiers to this very day suffer with things like PTSD. And we need to do better. And Audie Murphy is one of those people who helped put us on that path We still got a long, long way to go yet, but he helped get us started along that road at least. And I don't want to pretend he was the first or the only to come forward, but he was in a position to really make it count, and that's important. So let's go ahead and see what Sabaton has to say about Audie Murphy, and we'll go from there. As always, I'll do what I do on a lot of my music videos. We'll play through a verse or a chorus, and we'll roll it back and then break it down. So with that said, let's do this. Oh, I love the fife. I'm assuming it's a fife.
A short man from Texas, a man of the wild, thrown into combat where bodies lie piled. Hides his emotions, his blood's running cold. Just like his victories, his story unfolds. Light, our white light, if there be any glory in war, let it rest on them like hell.
Unless they're the Russians during World War I, in which case they do come back for a second round. But that's the exception, not the rule. If you know, you know. Anyway, let's break this down real quick.
A short man from Texas, a man of the wild.
That's pretty accurate. One of the things that stands out in the Audie Murphy story, and I think the Fat Electrician did a good job of driving this home, is that Audie Murphy was technically a little too short and a little underweight for a soldier. He probably should not have been able to join, but they actually ended up fudging some of his information on his documents in order to get him in. I remember he was also a little too young, so in just about every metric, he should not have been in the war, at least not when he entered. Man of Texas, yes, he was from Texas. A man of the wild, that's absolutely accurate. One thing that we know about Audie Murphy, because people were later asking him how he became such a great shot, because he was a crack shot. He said that we were so poor when I was young that we had to hunt our own food, and you couldn't afford to miss because we couldn't afford the bullets. If we missed, we didn't eat. It was simple as that. So this is a man who grew up in hardship and who developed survival skills as a consequence of that, including the ability to not miss. Because yeah, if you miss, you don't eat that day.
Thrown into combat where bodies lie piled. Hides his emotions, his blood's running cold. Just like his victories, his story unfolds.
Okay, so we're talking about hiding emotions and blood running cold. One thing that you'll learn about Audie Murphy, especially if you look at his autobiography or his poems or even his music that he wrote the lyrics for and occasionally composed, is that this is a guy who saw the horrors of war and recognized them as such. But he has this reputation of being this fearless soldier who was not affected by the war, which is why I think his later acts of coming forward and talking about PTSD had such an impact, because they're out of character for what people saw from him in the war. This is a guy who will grab a machine gun and charge 100 enemies by himself in order to protect his men. This is the kind of man Audie Murphy is. So you get this idea of him as this cold, emotionless hero who does whatever needs to be done, which is absolutely accurate. But if you look at his music and you look at his poems, you understand that that's not who he really is. He's at least in the moment holding it in. he's putting on this false front of, I'm impervious, we're gonna win, and I'm gonna get us through this. But in reality, it's absolutely affecting him, and it's going to devastate him later on.
Bright, our white light, if there be any glory in war, let it rest on them like him.
I agree 100%. War itself is not glorious. It's never glorious. It's butchery. That's what war is. There's no way around that. But the actions of individuals in war can be horrendous or they can be glorious. So we've got to make that distinction. And sometimes I think some people have problems making that distinction. War itself isn't glorious, but occasionally you'll come across people who do glorious things in war, whether there's somebody like Audie Murphy who rise above the occasion and take on impossible odds to protect his fellow soldiers, or even, you get people like Dawes, who is a conscientious objector who will not fight, but becomes famous in war for rushing into battle to pull his fellow soldiers out, risking his own life to do so. There is absolutely glory in the actions of individuals, just as there is evil and darkness too. Can go either way, but if there's going to be glory, let it rest with men like Audie, men who put the lives of others first, who do what they need to do to win, and who recognize that war is hell. To Hell and Back comes from his autobiography. That's his own name for the autobiography. It shows you what he believes, how he sees war. And if you look at some of his poems, you'll see that as well. In fact, there's one, Crosses of Anzio, that was in his autobiography, where he talks about reclaiming this sod soaked in blood, or claiming this sod soaked in blood, where yes, we got a victory, but look at the cost. He even talked about men being cut down like swine or something to that effect. So it's clear that he saw war for what it was, and he definitely saw the dark side of it, the hellacious side of it. That was brilliant because they basically just referenced word from Audie Murphy himself, because The Crosses of Anzio is that poem I just referred to, and I'm pretty sure let's go through this. Yeah. Those are also lines from that poem, I'm pretty sure. If not that one, then one of his other poems, because I recognize both lines. And when we talk about men cannot sleep, well, let's talk about Anzio first. The Battle of Anzio was one of the bloodiest engagements by the Americans on the European front. It took place, it was Italy, and they were making a push. They got Sicily, then they went into Italy, and Anzio would be a beachhead landing there. And then they pushed in, wanted to put pressure on Rome, and then they would head up into France and then over towards Germany. Audie Murphy was not present during the initial landing at Anzio, so that's important to understand. He actually had malaria at the time. He was sick, but he did join them a little bit later at Anzio, so he does participate in some of the fighting, just not the initial assault to get them that beachhead there. And like a lot of beachhead assaults, they got pinned down and were under constant bombardment from artillery. That's something that he talked about in his poem on Anzio. In fact, there was a famous artillery gun at Anzio called Anzio Annie, it was a rail gun. It was a huge, huge gun that was brought in by rail car and would fire from the rail line. But these guns would keep these men pinned on the beach, and they were nonstop fire. It's not like in the movies where you have this boom, boom, periodic and explosions here and there. It is nonstop, constant. Same thing in World War I, but even in a situation like the landings at D-Day or the landings at Anzio or any other major landing like this where there's resistance, they're not going to fire haphazardly. They blanket fire and they sustain it continuously. So yeah, you're not sleeping. Now, Hell 6 Feet Deep, that could be a reference to graves, but it's also, I think he actually, if I remember right, I read his autobiography way back, the 80s. So don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure he said he actually got that, the idea of war being hell being 6 feet deep from World War I reference, about the trenches on no man's land. And in the case of Audie Murphy, it could refer to graves, or could also refer to the foxholes that they were hunkered down in during this bombardment, as well as the graves. So it can mean a lot of different things. And that's the beauty of poetry, is it can mean however you want to interpret it. So yeah, charging and attacking was kind of Audie Murphy's thing. He was not one to back down from a fight if it needed to be fought. So if people were in danger or people were in threat, he definitely was the charge and attack type. And we see that in several of his most famous encounters, where he would go in sometimes, for all intents and purposes, single-handedly, taking on a large group of men just protect his fellow soldiers. So the guy was not known for holding back, that's for sure.
A man of the 15th, a man of can-do. Friends fall around him, and yet he came through. Let them fall face down if they must die, making it easier to say goodbye. Right.
Okay, so we're going back to that. So let's go into this.
A man of the 15th, a man of can-do.
Okay, a man of the 15th, a man of can-do. That's a reference to his division. He was a 15th Infantry Division, which was said to be the can-do division. So that's just a reference to that. Now, can-do was also the motto of the Seabees. So, but he was not a Seabee. He was of the 15th Division, which was also called the can-do division. So that tracks.
Friends fall around him, and yet he came through. Let them fall face down if they must die, making it easier to say goodbye. Right.
I think we're setting up for talking about his PTSD. Let them fall face down. It's easier to say goodbye. One of the things that soldiers are often taught is during war, you have to dehumanize the enemy. They're not people. They're an obstacle in our way. And you have to teach your soldiers that, because otherwise they're not going to be able to pull the trigger. And even if they can, they're going to immediately break down. Because it's human nature, for most of us anyway, is not conducive to being mass killers. It's not in our DNA, typically. It breaks us. And dehumanizing your enemy and dehumanizing your friends. Just let them fall face down so I don't have to deal with this right now. But of course, that never works, does it? This is going to lead to, these are the things that lead to PTSD. They lead to survivor's guilt. Why did I get out and all my friends died? And they even allude to that. He makes it through, but his friends don't. All of these things just serve to break a person. And again, one reason I really admire Audie Murphy is because he comes through this alive. He's this iconic hero, and he could easily have played the hero on the big screen, which he did. He absolutely did. He didn't have to burst that bubble. He could have spent the rest of his life coasting on that image of himself and this iconic hero. But instead, he uses his fame to talk about this, about how he's broken and how other men like him are broken. And again, I respect his war record, but I respect him more for doing that, because I think that's a fight that needed to be fought in the post-war years. It's a fight we still need to fight today, because we still haven't gotten that right. We spend ridiculous amounts of money on the military and not enough on taking care of the people that come back. So, and a lot of money on teaching them and enabling them to kill other people, and not enough on taking care of the soldiers themselves. I think we need to reprioritize that just a bit, especially here in the United States, because we don't have a clear and present threat. We really don't. We had the occasional terrorist attacks, but an enemy on our border that's going to invade, we don't have that. Not unless Canada really is secretly plotting against us, which I don't think they are, and goes for Mexico. Maybe put a little of that money towards taking care of people like this. If we can see them as heroes, then we can see them as people who we can take care of, who we can help. Maybe we can be heroes for them. Anyway, let's continue. Sorry, but as somebody who grew up during the Vietnam War and remembers seeing it end and knowing quite a few people who served in Vietnam over the years and seeing how they were treated during the war and especially afterwards, and the lack of treatment that a lot of them have gotten and the problems they faced, it just always bothered me. It always has, and it always will. Let's continue.
If there be any glory in war, let it rest on men like him, who went to hell and came back.
Yes, exactly.
Cross the snow of Anzio, where no soldiers sleep and where hell 6 feet deep. The deathless weight, there's no debate. So charge and attack, going to hell and back.
I love that they're using Audie's own words. I think that's brilliant to do in this. It's just brilliant.
Oh, gather round me and listen while I speak. Oh, law, where hell is 6 feet deep. And all along the shore, where cannons still roar. They're haunting my dreams, they're still there when I sleep.
I knew they were going for that. I'm not going to rewind that part. But yeah, I had a feeling they were building up to talking about the PTSD, where no man can sleep and they still haunt my dreams. It breaks people. There's just no other way to put it. War breaks people. Some deal with it better than others, but I don't think anybody comes out of it unchanged. At least those that see active combat anyway. That's right, bring back that 5. Great.
He saw across the snow of Anzio, where no soldiers sleep and where hell 6 feet deep. The deathless weight, there's no debate. He charged and attacked, he went to hell and back.
All right, looks like we're done. I'm going to say that Sabaton did another brilliant job. I love the inclusion of the 5, as you could probably tell. I think that's appropriate for a military song of this nature. And I don't know if it was a real 5, but I'm sure that's what it was intended to suggest. Sounded like one anyway. But also using Audie Murphy's own poetry and music lyrics as part of the song, I think is brilliant. But also, one thing I've noticed with Sabaton is that a lot of their videos, almost all of them that I've seen so far, have been military videos, which makes sense. But they don't glorify the war itself. I think they take great pains not to glorify war. They go through great pains to glorify individuals or groups in some cases. The Winged Hussars being a good example of that, or the citizens during the Warsaw Uprising, and so on and so forth. It's clear to me that they understand war. They understand that it is hell, and that I think they do a great job of walking that line between doing these rousing songs that pay tribute to some of our greatest iconic moments in war. The Warsaw Uprising again, the Charge of the Hussars, people like Audie Murphy, and everybody they talked about in all the different songs. Even ships like the Bismarck, even though, people think of the people who made the Bismarck as maybe not the nicest people on earth, or the regime, I guess I should say, the regime that made it. But at the same time, it's this iconic ship. And I think they do a great job of paying tribute to these things without, in fact, I'd say without glorifying war itself, but they actually kind of go the opposite direction. And I think they really do a good job of making it clear that war itself isn't glorious. It's blood, it's death, it's hell. And but it's the darkest moments that allow things to shine their brightest, right? So we get these moments of light in these situations, and I think they do a great job of highlighting that and doing it in a very sensitive way. I think they do a great job at that. So thank you again for joining me on this journey. I never thought that I would enjoy and look forward to seeing Sabaton, because I've never been into any kind of metal at all, which isn't to say there haven't been specific songs from the various genres of metal that I have liked over the years. Just as a mainstay, it's never been one of my favorite genres, whether it be heavy, power, whatever. Just not my cup of tea. But I've absolutely enjoyed this. Part of it's because of the history, and a part of it is because of their deliberate sensitivity to the topic. And part of it is because they do a really great job at incorporating interesting motifs from other songs in some cases, or in this case, poetry from Audie Murphy himself, or even just things like the Five. I love all that stuff that they do like that. For me, it's brilliant. So thanks to those of you who put me on the Sabaton, and the rest of you who have kept me on it. I really appreciate it. And we'll be back for some more music next Thursday. And until then, thank you for joining me, and see you all later. Bye-bye.